Are You Nuts? A Tom and Scott Mystery, Book 7. Author Mark Richard Zubro. St. Martin's Press, New York. Eric Aust, narrator. Chapter 13. I decided it was time for a Meg confrontation. She'd been downright nasty. She had answers, and I needed to have them. I called Scott. I told him I'd be home after talking to Meg. He wished me good luck. Outdoors, the break from the summer humidity continued. The refreshing breeze was from the north. The humidity had been dropping all day. If you didn't have a classroom that faced south or west, you might be able to get through the day tomorrow. My truck was fine. I drove to Meg's. She'd lived in Frankfort for a short while, but moved back to River's Edge a few years ago. I saw her car in the driveway. She answered the door. She was dressed in a purple sweatsuit and sneakers. I got a look that would have withered the soul of the worst student discipline problem. "I'd like to talk, Meg. It's important. You know it is, too." She moved away from the door. She left it open, but did not invite me in. I followed her. We stood in the middle of her living room. I began. "I don't understand what it is I have done so wrong that has made you so angry." "You silly twit. Haven't you figured it out? I did bash Jerome with that book." "Oh," I sat down. "You killed him?" "Yep." "Then why did you hide that second book in my room?" "I didn't. The police mentioned it, but it made no sense to me. I refused to answer their questions, so they refused to give me any explanations. I liked your lawyer and his advice." "What book?" "There was another copy of Smith's Comprehensive Encyclopedia in the back of one of my cabinets with blood and everything. It had no fingerprints on it except for mine. I inadvertently touched it when I found it." She sat down. "Odd. What happened that night?" She gazed out the front window at the flowers and shrubs she'd planted around her house. I let the silence go beyond the uncomfortable. She didn't seem to notice. "I didn't plan to kill him. It just happened. He wanted to make me convince you to support him for union president. He threatened me." "With what?" "In the first district I worked in, the teachers called a strike. I crossed the picket line. That may not be a tragedy, but I've always been ashamed of it." "Would you really bend to that kind of threat?" "I did indeed refuse to bend to that kind of threat. He got vicious and mean, called me a scab. I've always felt ghastly about my behavior then. It's why I quit that district, and why I've been so pro-union since. I was trying to make up for it. At any rate, he and I were both out of control, much worse than in the meeting. Finally, he picked up a book and threw it at me." "Then it was self-defense." "No, I ducked and laughed at him. He screamed at me at the top of his lungs and told me I'd be sorry. He'd made me so angry that when he turned his back, I picked up the first book that came to hand. I took a running start and smashed him one from behind." "How could that be the first book? The body was halfway around to the other side of the room." "That was so odd. And now you tell me about this other book." She shook her head. "Beluther was bashed with another volume of the same encyclopedia." She smiled briefly. "How ironic. I heard a rumor you were at school last night." "Checking everything." Her smile was cool. "I was home, alone." I cleared my throat. "I don't get something. How did he get to that odd corner of the room? You said you ran after him. Did you chase him?" "No, he walked past the checkout desk. I hit him there." "There was no blood near the checkout desk." "I know." "Meg, what's going on?" "I'm not sure why I'm telling you. Maybe I'm just tired of holding in the truth. I couldn't tell the police I hit him. That's stupid. I'm not. After I bashed him, I tried to revive him, but without success. I remember kneeling next to him, listening to the quiet. I remember hearing the clock over the checkout desk tick and thinking about my mother's funeral. Sort of odd, but I wasn't thinking clearly at that instant. Then I ran to the nearest washroom to get some water to try and revive him. He was breathing when I left. When I got to the washroom, I didn't have a cup with me to carry my water. I had to run to the teacher's lounge to get something to hold water. I couldn't have been gone more than 5 minutes. By the time I got back, the body had moved. I figured Maybe he'd awakened on his own and had simply got up and left to find the police to press an assault charge. I was sure he would. That's when I noticed the books on the floor. I walked around the room and there was his body. The book I'd hit him with was next to him. He was dead. I noticed a few dark smears that I realized must be blood. I hadn't seen any when I hit him. I thought I might have just missed the blood the first time. There wasn't all that much. I thought it was odd, but I figured maybe he recovered long enough to stagger around the room, probably fallen again and hit his head on something. Even if that was true, I'd still be implicated for the initial hit. Had you really forgotten your purse? Actually, yes. I also had a meeting set up with him. No one was supposed to know about it. That was Jerome. If you have a choice, always tell a secret. I thought it was kind of odd, but I presumed I killed him. That's why I didn't want you investigating. I was afraid you'd figure it out. No, I just out and out told you. I can't imagine why you'd want to still be a friend or why you'd want to investigate the murder. Maybe you didn't kill him. She gazed at me for a brief moment and smiled. That's kind of you to be loyal. I guess I shouldn't have snapped at you at the courthouse, but really, what choice did I have? You were going to stick your nose in it and make it worse. If by some miracle I didn't kill him, I realized that I was capable of harming another human being. I always thought of myself as a rational, thoughtful person, if not an outright pacifist. How could I be driven to such an extreme? He must have made you very angry. He kept denying reality. That drives me bonkers. Trust me. When people are willfully stupid, I get loony. Willful stupidity as a felony offense works for me. I actually got a small smile out of her. Listen, Meg, it's not easy to think of yourself in a different light. Violence can be frightening. It may not be easy to accept. But you need to give yourself time. We're all capable of it, even if we don't want to face it. You also need to think right now. Certainly you hit him and knocked him out. You don't remember blood from that first time. Maybe there wasn't any. Maybe someone came in and finished the job. I can never prove that. I found out that there are a lot of secrets that all these people have been harboring. Dead is dead. Down is down. Belusa said she saw you in the hall. I hadn't heard you left before the end of the meeting. Where was I going and for what? Well, yeah. Just trying to cool off and do some deep breathing. I know that doesn't sound dramatic, but it's true. How did your purse get next to the body? I was in such shock. I thought I must have put it there. But it was lost. How could you have? I guess I just must have. I've got another question. How did the book get next to him? What? When you hit him, where did you put the book? I'm not sure. She thought a minute. I was in such shock. I don't remember. I must have just put it down on the counter. When you came back with the water, you didn't pick up the book? No. Try this instead, Meg. You bashed Jerome. You ran off. You were gone. What, 5 minutes? At most. Meanwhile, the killer comes in. Moves the body. Why? I don't know yet. The body is moved for whatever reason. The killer must have been watching and listening from behind the stacks or in the hall. Using gloves or only touching the edges of the book, he or she bashes him again. This time, blood is drawn. The murderer takes your purse and puts it next to the body to add weight to the prints you have left on the book. Why put that book in your room? That book in my room is more proof you didn't do it. The killer wanted to add me as a suspect. You wouldn't implicate someone else in something you did. It had to be pure accident that the killer happened upon your quarrel. Serendipitous? Murder? I guess it's possible. I didn't think I'd kill somebody. Why do you think I wouldn't try and implicate someone else? Did you? No. If you wanted to implicate me, you'd have put both books in my room or wiped one off completely and left only the one in my room. The killer wanted to implicate both of us. So, the killer takes another book and wipes off the prints and bashes him again. He or she had to be planning on the spur of the moment. Under those circumstances, it's easy to screw up. Why wipe off the prints? so that I would be implicated as well. The killer couldn't put my prints on it. Whoever it was had to simply eradicate all of them. That's an awful lot to do in a short period of time. A person drags or carries the body to the back. The killer took the book with your prints on it to finish the job. And gets another book, and does it again, and risks capture? Maybe it was an afterthought. And why drag the body to the back? To avoid being discovered. If the killer heard someone come in while he or she was dragging the body, it would be easy enough to plausibly say they were trying to revive him. Jerome gets bonked a second time. Was the part where you told the cops you called 911 true? I called after I found him the second time. Did you examine the rest of the library? No. Maybe the killer was in there while you examined him. She shuddered. Or maybe he or she was there all along. Or maybe you simply left too soon. The killer didn't have time. It is possible you really misplaced the purse and the killer found it. Or was bringing it back and finding Jerome out cold changed everything forever. Adding the purse would point to your guilt. That sure worked. How did the killer know I wouldn't just stay there or even begin to search the library? I could have stayed put or found a custodian right outside the door. The killer would have been trapped. Maybe the killer was ready to bash you as well. Not a lot of time to plan and think if it was a crime of passion. Mine was. While you were with the body, you were in danger. Whoever it was waited for you to leave both times. Maybe the second time was when the killer decided to try and implicate me as well. If the murderer was improvising, then he or she could have been making all kinds of mistakes. We don't know yet that the cops aren't going to try and pin part of this on me. Why would you murder Jerome? General principles? He was too stupid to live. She actually smiled. And thought there was a possibility that I wasn't the killer. Thank you for giving an old friend some hopes. It's most kind, but it is useless. Why? Even if I didn't kill him, I'm going to be prosecuted for assault. By whom? Your victim is dead. He's not going to care. All we have to do is find the real killer. I don't have that kind of energy. The theories you're expounding are just a little too unbelievable. If you try them on the police, they'll laugh you out of the station. Maybe even try and include you in as an accomplice. I wouldn't bother. Tom, I know what I did. When Todd drove me home, he didn't ask all kinds of silly questions, which I couldn't have answered. Then, anyway. I think I'm going to call him and tell him I'm prepared to plead guilty. It would be too humiliating to go through a trial. I'll take my punishment. If I received the death penalty, I'd probably die of old age before they got around to executing me. I think it's a little premature to pick out the correct execution attire. Even then, the murderer wasn't premeditated. You'll be around for quite a while. There is more to this than either one of us knows so far. I'm going to get to the bottom of it. You should call Todd and tell him all this. I will. I'm going to keep investigating. What I'm trying to find out is, what is this big secret of secrets that people are dancing around? There is another secret I have. I wasn't eager to hear more confessions. I could barely handle what I'd heard so far, but I prepared myself to listen. I was part of the problem with the Quigleys. Bjorn told me that his dad died of natural causes. I was young and foolish, perhaps half his age. He was proud of the community. The head of the school board, he got me my first job here. We had an affair. I thought we were so discreet. We had our tryst in Chicago, when the Conrad Hilton was still the Conrad Hilton, not whatever it is today. It was bliss, but it ended after our first real date. What happened was an election. His opposition threatened to tell about us, and they wanted him to withdraw. It would have meant divorce and disgrace. He was a pillar of the community when this scandal broke, and he couldn't take it. The first I knew about it was in the papers. I was married at the time. Old Meg had a secret affair as a young adult. Hidden fires indeed. That Bjorn remembered it differently, I didn't doubt. In fact, That was what led to the divorce before it became public knowledge. Somehow my husband found out. I'm sure I was much less clever than I thought I was. I would have left town, but I certainly wasn't going to go crawling back home to southern Illinois. My husband left me, and I only had my paltry income from working in the library. But why does any of this have an effect now? Lydia and Belutha and Jerome somehow found out. The three of them wanted me to turn on you. They wanted me to tell secrets about you. I'm not sure I know any to reveal. Do you dress up in women's clothes? Not even on Halloween. Well, that's the kind of information they wanted. I was to help them against you. I refused. By trashing you, they hoped to be able to trash Kurt and all that he'd done with the Union. Why? He wasn't running again. But Lydia, Belutha, and Jerome wanted to run against his record. You can't imagine how desperate they were. Well, maybe you can. You've met them, and you know, that type of person. Even a race for dog catcher can bring out the worst in people. They were using it for revenge, to get even. I feel like I'm living in Morons Are Us. Were there no links to which any of these people would not go? And if they wouldn't, their friends would egg them on. One person after another would tell the latest rumor. Each more fantastic than the other, it would make them more desperate to win. As their anger increased, their rhetoric heated up, and they did more and more outrageous things. Why didn't Seth and Jerome ever just talk to each other? It's either high stupidity or religious fanaticism, which is basically the same thing, I guess. I think they actually wanted to get together, but winning the presidency was also part of Lydia's and Belutha's faction, attempted to control one more elective office. Jerome couldn't back down. His buddies had made a commitment. What tangled webs we weave. Sorry, John Pike is getting to me. I told her what he'd threatened to do. It never ends, does it? Meg said. Nope. One last thing, I feel bad. I couldn't tell Agnes the whole story that night. I hope I didn't get her into any trouble. She's fine. Worried about you like we all are. I stood up. I gave Meg a hug and said, I'm going to try and get a good night's sleep tonight so I can be fresh for harassing suspects. Call Todd and tell him everything. He'll know exactly what to do. Meanwhile, don't give up hope. She smiled wanly and thanked me. I drove home as the north wind was rising to a gale. I had the window down and my arm draped over the edge. It was deliciously cool. I pressed the remote control switch on my key ring to open the outer gate. I pulled into the driveway and shut off the headlights. I stopped to listen to the silence and watch the twilight deepen to night. The early stars began to glow. The rim of an orange moon began to peek over the horizon. I let the car idle forward into the garage. I entered the house through the breezeway into the kitchen. All the electric lights were off. 2 votive candles were burning on the table. The smell of garlic and rosemary filled the air. The windows in the living room were partly open, admitting the refreshing air. A fire of applewood and sage burned in the fireplace. Honey, I'm home. It didn't seem like the right thing to bellow out. I loosened my tie and draped my sport coat over a chair. I found Scott in the library. All the walls had built-in bookcases to the ceiling. The only gaps were for the windows and the door. A set of leather-covered furniture clustered in the center of a Parisian rug. He was reclining in a brown leather chair. A reading light was on next to him, and a book was open on his lap. He was gazing out the window at the rising moon. The heels of his black leather boots rested on each end of an ottoman. He was wearing black leather pants. You have to have the right build to wear leather pants, and if you sit down in them, the slightest bulge of a love handle will show. Scott looked perfect. He wore no shirt, but had a metal chain around his neck and a leather band around his right biceps. A visor of a leather cap hung low over his forehead. Another fire was in the fireplace. I could smell the leather of his pants and the chairs. Definitely not a "Hi, honey, I'm home" outfit. I could see my reflection in the windows, and I presume he could too. He spoke to my reflection. Hi, Tommy. I sat down on the floor between his legs. I felt him move them as pillars on each side of me. He leaned down from behind and finished untying my tie and placed it with his book on the teak end table. He was rereading The Wind in the Willows. He placed his hands on my shoulders and gently kneaded the muscles. He murmured, I was reading the part where Mole stops Rat so they can go to the Hole Mole, abandoned, his old home. I leaned my head back into his crotch and listened to the gentle flow of his words as he described the scene almost verbatim. I lost myself in the rhythm of his thrumming baritone. I began caressing him after we finished. We had a dried out but not burned dinner. Scott had made a trip to the city. He had had a conference with his banker, broker, and accountant, and then stopped at his penthouse. I filled him in on the latest developments in the case. I like thinking she didn't do it, he said, and I sort of respect her for being willing to bash up a good one. After the dishes were done, we both put on gym shorts and white socks. He wore a Bullwinker t-shirt. I chose one with a University of Oz logo, tiny ruby slippers, and a small witch flying against the background of poppies, and the Emerald City. We sat in front of the fireplace in the living room. We were discussing the murder. I think the body being moved convinced me, I said. Somebody doesn't just stagger around then plop over dead. I don't know, Scott said. That seems kind of plausible to me. The first blow might have made the subsequent ones more effective. The book being moved tells me she's innocent, if Meg was telling the truth. Reluctantly, I agreed, Scott said. Meg's at least partly guilty. We're all capable of violence, and we all have those feelings. What about when you aim at a batter's head? I've never beamed anybody intentionally, but you hit a few guys. Yes, Meg just went a little further. Since it wasn't in the context of a game, she couldn't possibly get away with it. As we lay in bed later reading the article, sports contracts his lawyer had given him, entries from a hot pink notebook, I said, I'm a little worried about the kids' reaction tomorrow. The high school mind is not usually set to be receptive to openly gay teachers. I bet the reactions will startle you, or rather the lack of them. The vast majority simply won't care. The insecure idiots will feel compelled to make a statement. They always do. Yeah, you can't predict which way they'll jump. High school kids are emotionally volatile. Got that right. A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.